All right, back to the debate on Capitol Hill. And frankly, debate is really happening around America about the viability of the American auto industry. Should the federal government jump in now to prop up the ailing companies or allow the companies to file for bankruptcy if that's what it comes to? Bernard Whitman is Democratic strategist who is in support of the auto bailout plan. Republican strategist Alex Johnson is against the bailout. You know, Alex, let me ask you, why should they go? Why shouldn't we let them go into bankruptcy? I mean, it seems like then you
I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, what are the reasons for that?
I think we should.
Yeah.
I mean, I think from a practical standpoint, I mean, look at what, some of the airline industry, Continental went into bankruptcy years ago, came back a better airline. It would allow them to restructure the organization, get rid of some of the union demands that have been put on them, and maybe they could relocate to somewhere in the South where they actually do make cars quite well, in Tennessee or Alabama or somewhere like that. So I think, bankruptcy, all in all, might be the best thing for them.
Don't you get rid of a lot of legacy costs if you let them go into bankruptcy? Isn't that one of the big issues, or if not the big issue they have right now, beyond the credit crunch, the problem that existed before the credit crunch?
Well, I think the situation is a lot different, and the problem is going to be that I think banks are going to be loath to accept that debt. And so, therefore, I believe the federal government needs to step in. Now, having said that, I believe Washington is going to have as tough a time selling this bailout as Detroit is selling cars in a bad economy. But I do believe that we need to rescue the industry for economic reasons, for cultural reasons, and for national security reasons.
Let me use an example. I used this with Phil LeBeau last week, actually. When Eastman Kodak was suddenly facing a digital revolution with digital cameras, people were not buying film or film cameras at the same rate anymore. They were facing a crisis, and for the places where their plants are located, it was a crisis for all the people they employed, all the vendors that relied on Eastman Kodak, and they had to figure out a way to innovate, to become creative, and to work in a new market. Why isn't the same thing true for the auto industry? Because
the entire economic fiber of the country is completely different today than it was when Eastman Kodak went through that. Today, if GM went under, you would see potentially 250,000 people out of work. Those people, in turn, the supply network is another million people, and those 1.25 million people employ yet another 1.7 million. So you're talking about risking 3 million jobs,
Alex,
which would shoot this unemployment rate up to 10%.
Yeah. The argument here is that all those people on the public dole, then, if you've got all these people unemployed.
Right. Absolutely. Well, no, not necessarily. Look, cars aren't going to go away, and auto parts aren't going to go away. People are still going to drive GMs and Chryslers and Fords, and you're still going to have to create parts for those, and those people will find jobs. I mean, look, it's not easy, it's difficult, but those people aren't just going to sit around on their hands and knees waiting for money. They're going to look for new jobs. What you're doing by giving them money, and we've already given them $25 billion. They want 25 more. I'm sure they'll be back in 6 months. 25 more, 50 more. Is you're eliminating risk from their operations. You made a good point about Eastman Kodak. They had to innovate. They had, or they would fail. What you're doing is you're taking all the risk out of their business, and they don't have to innovate. They're not being forced to.
Bernard, what about that argument that the 25,000, we wish, $8 billion is just the beginning, and that it just then is going to continue to balloon from there?
Well, I think clearly the $25 billion can't come without restrictions, and there has to be clear policy that is going to be geared towards getting Detroit to innovate, particularly in areas that have applications outside of the auto industry. Fuel cells, which are going to power the next generation of fuel-efficient cars, and also give great contribution to military technology. I mean, the truth is, we rely on the auto industry not only to build cars in this country, but to produce things like the 1,000 armor-plated vehicles that were recently deployed in Iraq protecting our troops.
Alex, the conversation continues. Thank you for your contributions.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up the Politics of Money here on MSNBC. I'm Melissa Francis from CNBC.